I can tell you right
Hmm.
now, I've got at least 6 or 7 of them who I know that tomorrow, if I say, guys, no, sorry, we can't pay ourselves for 6 months. Are you with me? They all will say, I'm with you. People, they start realizing what it takes to become a founder.
I mean, that's resilience right there. And I haven't heard a story that inspiring in a while. You're watching Next Big Wave, the podcast for founders by founders in Southeast Asia. In this episode, we're going to talk about founder journeys, growth strategies, and much more. Just to help me out, if you could like and subscribe, it would be awesome. And let's get into the episode. Welcome on today's episode of Next Big Way. I have Rajiv Lamba. So Rajiv is a business owner of a very interesting business that I just found out about this week, located in Singapore. I think right now you're actually based in India, but your business is located in Singapore. And I can't wait to dive into it. So without further ado, Rajiv, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, Tim. Thanks a lot for having me on the show today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, for people who don't know you out there, could you kind of give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you're about, what your business does, and let's keep it minimal so that it's a way of introduction. We'll go into a lot more detail as we go in the show.
Sure. As you already mentioned my name, it's Rajiv Lamba. I'm an entrepreneur. I have been in the field of market research for over 2 decades. I stay in Gurgaon, which is one of the part of India. I came back to India a couple of years back. Before that, I was in Southeast Asia for over 2 decades. So I was in Indonesia, then I moved to Singapore. That has been my journey till now. I started Neurosensum, which is a market research company, more technology based, in 2018. So this is my second stint of a startup. I made my first exit in 2017. So that's a very short introduction about myself.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I like that. I was reviewing your LinkedIn profile and your trajectory. As you mentioned, you've already had an exit, so congrats on that. But also, like, I see that some of the jobs you've held have definitely steered you towards what you've built with Neurosensum. Because I see you worked at Nielsen, and like what you're working on now is kind of like a much more advanced version of the type of data Nielsen provides, right? So can you walk me through your sort of framework or like the way your mind was working as you were working these jobs, how you were thinking about your next move, and how did you come up with this idea in the end?
Sure. See, when I went to Indonesia, that was in 2004. I joined a company which was a smaller company. Over the years, when I went into multiple companies, WPP and Nielsen, I was doing consumer research, but I realized that the technology was changing big time. But the way the research was happening was still very traditional in nature. That I'm asking you and you're telling me, which is what we call as a claim-based research. The problem with that kind of research is that people, they tend to be so nice and polite on the face when you interview
Right.
them. They will never say, they hardly say that something is not good, right? So typically on a scale of 1 to 5, which is the traditional scale that we use in market research, the
Hmm.
average score was 4.2 or 4.3, which is so high, which means everybody is claiming that they're liking something. And
Right.
based on that, marketers are launching their campaigns, their products, their packaging, which is not a very accurate representation. The holy grail was always, can I read your mind? Can I go beyond what you're saying? Can I understand your feelings, expressions? And thankfully, I managed to I managed to travel a lot during my younger days. And I learned that there are a lot of techniques out there that the world was exploring, especially it was used in the developed part of the world. One
Hmm.
of that was neuroscience, which is to deep dive into a subconscious mind of a consumer, and that really caught my attention. That how you can use these different techniques and devices
Hmm.
to pick the brain signals, facial expressions, eye tracking, movement, and that
Right.
has been the journey of why I left a traditional based market research and got started my own firm, which is what is called as Neurosensum, a neuroscience based consumer research.
Got it. So I have a question for you because I'm not super familiar with like neuroscientifically based sort of consumer research. Like the reason the traditional consumer research has been done the way it is because it's quite simple, it's quite accessible. What you're describing is kind of doing neuroscience, meaning probably tracking wave activity, brainwave activity, and all these types of things. So it's a lot less accessible. How do you get people involved in these types of studies? Do you have to tell me more about that process because it's something so foreign to me.
Sure. So I think the fact that we all think it's not as easily accessible, possibly that was the world 7 years back, but it's not the world right now. Now there are various ways that you can understand the expressions and the feelings, right? One way is where I meet you face to face. I ask you to come to my office. I put an EEG device on your head, and while you're watching a commercial, uh, drinking a product, or using a product, or looking at a packaging, can be any particular use case, I will read those brain signals using the devices, and then we translate that into a metrics, which is what we call as the engagement metrics. So that's one way where still the research used to happen like that, right? I used to call people to our homes or to our offices, and that's how the research was happening. But the only additional element is this device, which is reading the
Hmm.
brain signals. So that's one way of doing it. Other more scalable way is where I ask your permission on your, say for example, you're sitting in your studio right now.
Hmm.
And if I ask you to give me a permission of your web camera and allow me to read your facial expressions and your eye tracking
Hmm.
movement, then I don't need to meet you face to face,
Right.
right? Which means it's far more scalable in nature.
Right. Is the accuracy just as good though with that technique versus the actual ECG or he
Yeah. So see, the EEG devices are far more
EG?
accurate.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're far more accurate in nature because it's reading your brain signals.
Hmm.
I think the depth, the insights that you get is far better because a lot of things that you're comprehending is in your brain, right? Facial expressions are also okay when I read it on a camera, but with facial expression, there is some degree of lack of accuracy because as Asians, we are not very expressive, right? When you look at the Western, possibly they're far more expressive, but when you look at Asians, we are not too expressive on our facial signals. And if I'm looking at a stimulus, I'm not expressing at all, then what I will get is only a neutral zone, like a poker face, right?
Hmm.
So facial expressions to a large extent doesn't work in Asia, but
Okay.
EEG is far more global because it's the way the brain has been wired in a way. Eye tracking, which is another neuro technique, is very accurate. Whether you do it face to face or whether you do it through webcam or camera, that is also accurate. But facial expressions is not as accurate in an Asian context because of the lack of the facial muscle movement.
I really want to know more about these studies that you're doing with the EEGs because it's something that, I understand the science, I understand it's evolved quite a lot, but in terms of being able to get statistical significance for your clients, how do you get people into these studies? What's really involved in a study overall? If you're watching this and you're a B2B startup founder in Southeast Asia, struggling to grow your startup, we have a whole community of founders just like you. And on a weekly basis, we discuss strategies and growth hacks. We'd love to have you amongst us. Feel free to join at nextbigwave.co or find the link in the description. I'll see you there.
Sure. So, see, these are all typically paid projects, Tim. So, imagine a company can be any FMC, consumer good or automotives or banking or
Hmm.
whichever it is. They normally approach us that they want to do a particular, so they have a particular use case that I want to do my commercial testing, I want to do a product testing, or I want to do a packaging testing, whatever it is, before they launch that or they want to make changes to it. So, what we do, Tim, we recruit a sample which is representative of the target audience, right? So because it's impossible to go to everybody
Yep.
because it's going to be too expensive to do a consumer research.
Of course. Sure. Yeah.
So typically, what we do, we recruit a sample which represents the target audience, and either we invite these people to our office where we conduct this particular test, like putting a EEG device on their head, and they go through the stimulus or they go through a campaign or whatever is the use case. And post that, when we record those signals, we give a recommendation to the client that which part of the ad is not working, where consumers are getting engaged, where are they getting disengaged. That's one way
Yeah.
of doing it. Second way, which is far more scalable nowadays because the world has moved towards online, In that case, say for example, we do get a lot of projects coming from a different part of the world, say US, Europe, where we sit out of India, but we work with those clients where it's almost using an online panel where we use a third party
Hmm.
to send service to the consumers. But we tell them in advance that we will need their web camera access because we need to also record their
Right.
neuro expressions. So that's how it also happens, like the way I explained to
Hmm.
you, right? Eye tracking of facial expressions. So that's far more
Right.
scalable where sitting out of any country, you can do projects in any other country for a typical client. These are all paid projects where
Hmm.
clients they pay us, and of course, we also incentivize consumers to participate in this research.
Right. Okay, so these are paid participants, basically.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And tell me, like this business, you've been doing it for a little while. Have you raised funds? Is this a bootstrap business? Where are you in terms of the business life cycle right now?
So Tim, we have raised funds. So we started this in 2018. In the last 6 years, we have four round of fundraising. So we are currently at Series B uh, round. So we have raised decent to scale the business across Southeast Asia as well as India. And currently, I think within 4 years, we became profitable as a unit. So in 2022, we hit our profitability. So we didn't really had the
Okay.
need to raise more beyond that, but we have definitely done
Right.
decent round of fundraising. Yeah.
Okay. And I see you also branched off into something a little bit more like SaaS, which is called SurveySensum, right? So what was the idea behind spinning off a product there? Did you see a gap in the market? What was the concept or the notion behind that?
Very interesting question, Tim. So when we started Neurosensum and we launched Neurosensum, when we were going to the clients, we saw very big need gap that a lot of clients they want to do a lot of more consumer research because nowadays uh, data is a new oil as everybody says. So people want to understand their consumer behavior. They are sitting on loads of consumer database. Every company has their own consumer database, but they were not utilizing that database to the fullest. So a lot of clients started asking us, can you give me a software where I can utilize my own database? I can send service real time. It's like an omni-channel service. I can collect the feedback. I can look at the reports. I can look at the dashboards, but I don't need a consultant because going to a consultant
Hmm.
is expensive. Going to a consulting company is expensive. And that's how SurveySensum was created as a concept in 2020, where we created like
Hmm.
a DIY, do it yourself customer feedback platform, where you can integrate that with your CRM. You can integrate that on the app. You can integrate that on a social media. You can put a QR code on the store. So the idea is the moment a customer is interacting with the product and service, a survey will go to the customer. They can respond, and you can look at all of that real time on the screen, so that you don't need always a consultant to do a consulting for you, because these softwares are completely
Right.
AI enabled. They can give you the insights on a real time basis.
Mm.
I'll give you an example, Tim. For example, say imagine
Yep.
you are a customer experience manager in a bank, say a DBS bank, for example. I'm just giving an example.
Right.
And you want to understand post people that go to your branch, what they feel about the branch, what they feel about the frontline experience. So the way it can happen is the moment they go to the branch, there's a QR code out there, and once they interact with the frontliner, they can scan a QR code and they can give you feedback. And you sitting in the central branch can see what customers who are going to different branches they feel about you. Are they happy with your service? They are not happy with your
Hmm.
service. And if they close an account, you definitely want to know why somebody is closing an account. These are possibly premium customers for you and they've closed an account. So you don't need to go to a
Hmm.
consulting company because you have that database with you. The moment somebody closes an account, and a survey can go to them even on a WhatsApp, not on email because nobody reads email nowadays. And you can ask those
Right.
questions to them where you can look at this information on a real time basis. You can understand who's happy, who's not happy, why they're leaving you, why they're churning out, what they feel about you, and that is at a fraction of a cost because if you go to big companies or big consulting companies, it charges a lot of money. So now with SurveySensum, you can do far more. You can gain more insights at a fraction of the cost. That was the entire idea of SurveySensum 10.
Okay, got it. And as we talked before this podcast, both of these products seem fairly successful. You've already been to Series B and all. How do you manage both of these as an entrepreneur? Because it's already hard enough to manage one successful business. I'm curious how you manage your time, how you're able to handle all of this.
I think I've been kind of blessed in a way that I made an exit before, and I had
Right.
that experience of managing a company where it was not only one company that I was managing. So it was not only Indonesia in my previous company, but I also was one of the founders for Vietnam office as well as the Middle East office. So I went into a complex situation when I was very young, where I could manage three countries, and I was able to kind of make a lot of the get a lot of success for those companies. So that gave me a lot of experience then. So I think at the
Hmm.
same time I was blessed that I have got leaders in the team who could manage a lot of show independently. Of course, it takes time for anybody to come in to learn, to adapt. But thankfully, over time, things they progress really well, and these leaders who eventually became the co-founder in the company, they were able to step up. They were able to take the task very independently, and yeah, on hindsight, possibly it was tough. 3 years, 4 years to begin with, but now it looks relatively easy because things have been settled that well.
Yeah, yeah. You've been able to sort of delegate to the right people that you can trust. But let's go back to your exit because we kind of brushed that off. And an exit is very, very sort of rare and, kind of needs to be more celebrated. So why don't we go back in time and talk about that company and, what it was and what led you to an exit and how you managed all that? Because that's something people are very curious about usually.
Sure. So Tim, it was called Cadence International. It was a company which originated from UK. I was one of the shareholder there. I was not the founder. That company started 30 years back. So I was one of the
Wow.
early founders of Indonesia business and Vietnam as well as Middle East. So Cadence was like a Nielsen. In a way, it was a consumer research company,
Hmm.
and I think as so one of the Japanese firm bought Cadence because they wanted to have a global footprint. So in 2014, one of the Japanese firm bought Cadence International. I was a part of that journey where the entire discussion of the buyout happened. Of course, the entire agreements, which is shareholder agreements, were created. The entire diligence happened. So I went through that entire phase of how you make a successful exit, what all you need to pitch, going through the documents, showing our products to the company which you wanted to buy, uh, the the
Hmm.
IPs that the company owned. So that was a very interesting piece where in 2014 we got into a discussion, and post that there was an entire earnout phase which happened where there were some profitability targets that we were supposed to hit, where some part of the money got paid initially in 2014, and some part of the money got paid in 2017 when the entire
Yep.
profitability targets happened. So that was what was the journey.
Right. So the
Uh,
earnout, yeah.
yeah, the earnout period. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Even as a shareholder, it's nice to kind of have an exit event at some point. And sort of, one thing that I talk a lot about with the founders on this show is, the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, because as most people know, it's a roller coaster. We're always excited when there are highs, but when there are lows, we don't talk about it a lot. So I'm curious to know from your experience as a longtime founder. What have been some of the lows of your business or your life as an entrepreneur, and how did you overcome those?
So, like you rightly said, right? Every entrepreneur goes through a roller coaster ride. I also went through it multiple times. I think I'll say the worst or the toughest of the times that I had, Tim, was during the COVID time. When COVID hit in
Mm,
February, March 2020, We were fundraising at that time because at that time we were
Mm,
really scaling up, and suddenly hit
yeah.
COVID. We had little money to almost survive, uh,
Hmm.
because we whatever money we raised, we spent in scaling up the business at that time. Business was not profitable because we started in 2018. At that time, we were kind of recruiting people, scaling up the business. And when
Right.
COVID came in, we were in discussion with one of the investors to do our pre-series A round.
Okay.
All the discussions happened. Term sheet came in, but because of COVID, everything got onto a halt. We knew that the money
Mm.
will come someday, but it took us approximately 8 or 9 months to get that money in the bank. So from
How did you
February
cope with the
2000,
cash flow issues?
yes, I think how did I cope that? I think I was blessed that right from the day one, that I've always recruited people who are like-minded, which
Mm,
means your top management team, they should be willing to sacrifice. They should have resilience. They should know that they're there for the long term in the game. So
hmm.
what happened with me? So when I recruit people who are reporting into me, these are the qualities I look in them. Do they have resilience? What are the previous examples of their resilience? Can they make sacrifices or they want immediate gain right now? Are they there with me for the
Hmm.
long term? And thankfully, the team that I recruited, 5 or 6 people who were reporting into me, they were almost uh, on board that this is what we want to do. I remember for 7, 8 months, at least 10 or 12 of us did not take any salary.
Okay,
I, as
wow.
a, I, as a founder, could still not take salary because I was the one who started and I had the
Sure.
most to gain and most to lose at the same time. But for my team to step up and say, no, we will not take salary till the time we get out of this situation. And you will be very surprised, Tim. We didn't even fire a single person during
That's
that
nice.
time. We saw in COVID everybody was firing, people letting go, big companies who were sitting on big cash flows. They were
Hmm.
retrenching by 20 to 30%, or somebody retrenched 40%. We didn't even let go of a
Hmm.
single person. What we just did, the top 10 or 12 people in the company decided not to pay themselves for eight
Wow.
or nine months.
That's a huge sacrifice.
Yeah, that was a huge sacrifice that I think everybody in that company did. And I love my team for that. That's why they're still here with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's resilience right there. And I haven't heard a story that inspiring in a while. And I assume, God willing, when you have an exit with this business, they will get very well rewarded.
Sure. In fact, I also did, I give a lot of my shares to them. I think, see,
Oh,
it's
wow.
almost as simple as that. Do you want 100% of a million, or you want 10% of 100 million, right? What do you want in
Billion.
life?
Yeah.
Or a
Yeah.
billion? So I think the
Yeah.
idea is that I think what I as a founder I've always believed in giving, in sharing, uh, because if you think that you want to keep everything to yourself, then you will not go long in life. You have to
Hmm.
learn to be able to sacrifice when it comes the most because you're the founder. You have to have that ability to give more because when you give only then you
Hmm.
get. You can't expect get and then give. You
Yeah.
give and then you get. That's the way I think the entire trust builds, the loyalty builds, the friendship builds. And thankfully, I think if I remember those days, I still get a bit of shiver. I get a bit.
I'm getting shivers and I wasn't even there.
Yes, so I think those were the days. Somehow, 9, 10 months passed by. We were
Hmm.
surviving. We survived well because of the sacrifices people made. And I
Hmm.
think then possibly even the investors saw the sacrifices that the founders are able to make and the top team is making. And I think then in October, November 2020, we got the fund. And
Nice.
then we got the funding. We didn't raise enough again. Uh, we just raised enough so that we move in the path of practicality, scalable, as well as profitable unit, so that we don't have to dilute too much at a smaller valuation. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think that was one of the toughest ride that I have faced in 2000.
Can you share any numbers about what valuation? Because you're saying you raised too little, and I think that's a good advice for people raising money. Like, even if you can't get into the details, like, why do you feel you raised too little? You raised enough for like a short runway and you wish you had a longer runway, or what happened exactly?
So in 2020, we raised enough to have 1.5 years of runway.
Okay, pretty standard.
Pretty standard. So we raised enough to have 1.5 years of runway, because I told everybody in my team that you have to be self-sustainable. You know, that was a time where the world was talking about 3x growth, 4x growth, crazy numbers. Nobody looked at the cash flows. Everybody was burning, burning, burning. But I told team that we are raising enough for 1.5 years, and I want us all to be profitable within 1.5 years.
Hmm.
So that was the goal that we worked towards. I think in 2000, October 2020, when we got, uh, I think at that time we raised close to $1.7 million. We didn't raise a lot. That was
Hmm.
I think it was our third round, right?
That was your pre-A.
That was our pre, that's correct. But I
Okay.
think, but the objective was to ensure with that money we continue moving up, we continue scaling, but we don't lose the path of profitability. So I think in
Hmm.
November 2020 was the first time when we hit our profitability.
Okay.
And post that, we raised one more round, but that round became easier because we were profitable. We possibly were growing
Hmm.
at 30-40% annually, but our back was not
Okay.
against the wall. And I was telling everybody,
Right.
people around me, the days will come where a profitable, sustainable organization which is growing at 30-40% will start getting a respect. During those days,
Yeah.
anybody who was growing 2x or 3x was getting respect, and nobody was looking at net earnings, right?
Right.
So, but I was telling everybody, the day will come where your EBITDA margins will start playing into picture. Let the time come. I think honestly, I think from 2020, end of 2022, people started talking about path of profitability. VCs that
Yeah.
started shrinking their budgets, they started looking at organizations which are sustainable. They are able to cover their costs well. They're able to get the profitability margins. And post
Yep.
that, things became easier for us, Tim, because we knew that we are profitable. We don't raise, that's fine. Because see, when you're profitable, banks can give you loans. Venture debts are
Yeah.
happy to give you loans, right? There are a lot of other debt instruments that you can go towards without diluting.
For sure.
Now, why I
Hmm.
was always against diluting big? For a very simple reason, Tim. In my previous company, I felt if I had 3% more equity, I would have been possibly far better off in terms of money versus where I was at that point of time. So my previous startup
Hmm.
taught me the value of even a single percentage, because either you can keep it or you can give it to your hardworking people,
Right.
right? And that's one of the reasons I never raise so much that I have to dilute it at smaller valuations.
So you mentioned earlier that you kind of gave a lot of your equity to your employees, and now you hold about 10%. I'm not sure if those numbers are accurate, but
No,
I'm
far
wondering.
more than that.
Okay, so you're just kind of giving an example, but yeah, I get it. So you're giving a lot to your employees, and I'm curious, are these employees like in Asia or what? Because I'm from experience with my previous fintech TendoPay, when we were trying to compensate employees with equity, we were always kind of met with sort of like reservations. People would rather get salaries and high salaries than any equity at all. And I'm wondering if that's, localized to the Philippines or if you had this type of experience, because it seems like your employees are willing to take equity and understand future value and even take salary breaks for a certain period of time. So, can you kind of describe the type of employee profile you've been able to find that understands that value?
Sure. So I think the point that you mentioned is very true, whether it's Asia or non-Asia. We're talking about Asian employees right now. See, very few people understand the equity and the impact of equity that can change their life in the longer term, because everybody looks at salary in a shorter term. Very few people they want to make that sacrifices. I think the key thing is to identify those individuals who want to do that. They can be younger, they can be older, doesn't really matter. But I think what matters is mindset.
Hmm.
If you are in the game for a long, I think when I recruit people, my first, it's not that I've always been a brilliant recruiter. I also
Hmm.
made a lot of mistakes. A lot of people that I recruited who were reporting to me, possibly they were not having that mindset. Some of them also had that mindset. So it's not that you always will hit 100% conversion when it comes to the right profile. But the profile I think
Hmm.
that I always look for is what sacrifices have they done in the past. Everybody sacrifices for the family, but
Hmm.
have you done sacrifices for a greater good? Have you done sacrifices for your previous organizations? Have you ever done sacrifices where uh, you even for the society around you, for that matter of fact? So when you recruit people with that kind of mindset, some of them will eventually be standing with you, shoulder to shoulder in the difficult times, and that's what you need. I can tell you right
Hmm.
now, I've got at least 6 or 7 of them who I know that tomorrow if I say, guys, sorry, we can't pay ourselves for 6 months. Are you with me? They all will say, I'm with you.
Wow.
Right. So I think getting that
So
that
that
mindset.
sorry to interrupt you, but I was just wondering because you're in the neuroscience field. Do you use neuroscience in recruitment for yourself?
No, we don't. I think we don't use neuroscience in our own recruitment, but I think possibly because we know these methods a lot. Um,
Hmm.
of course, see, in research we use psychology a lot, right? So that's a part of the
Right.
consumer research that we do. So when we are interviewing or my top management, they are interviewing, they already are very trained. They're not psychologists, but they're very trained researchers by themselves. So when they are talking to
Hmm.
people, when they are recruiting by themselves, a lot of time they can see through
Hmm.
a personality. Of course, we do psychometric testing, we do all of that. But when you're interviewing a very critical
Hmm.
position, you know what kind of person you're talking to. Is that person is only there for a couple of months because that person wants a ladder to move towards the next step? Uh, but I think it's not. It doesn't only stop there, Tim. Right? That's very beginning of a recruitment. But see, what you show to
Hmm.
people, it what comes back to you. If I show them that I have integrity, I have trust, I have belief. So I'm not somebody who will always be kind of checking everything that my team is doing. When I recruit a top
Hmm.
manager, I give them
Micromanaging.
yeah, and I don't do micromanagement. I'm there
Hmm.
with them whenever they need support, but I give them complete responsibility. Uh, and when I give them a position, I say, this belongs to you. So they might come from a
Hmm.
bigger organization where they've never had that freedom. But the moment they come to our company, suddenly they feel that they have freedom to execute, they have freedom to speak, they have freedom to decide. And I'm only there as a
Right.
supporting hand for them. And they feel, no, when you get that freedom that I'm doing it, over time, you might not have that complete personality of a founder, but because you're executing, you're looking at P&Ls, you're taking decisions. Over time, in a span of 1 or 2 years, in a span of 1 or 2 years, people they start realizing what it takes to become a founder. And
Hmm.
over time, their personality also gets shaped because they get so much of freedom to execute things, to decide things, that you don't need to tell them anymore what to be done. They know, I need to make my P&L
Hmm.
profitable. And I have to do that. I then ask them, what do you want to do? A, B, C. So that the decision has to come from them. If you always tell to become profitable, you have to cut down your expenses, you have to grow your top line, you have to grow your margins, and you are taking
Hmm.
decision on their behalf, they will never get responsibility of taking that decision. But when you ask them to take
Right.
that decision, that your team is not doing well, your department is not doing well, what are your plans? Show me plan A, B, C. If your plan A will not work, what you will do? Do you have a plan B? If your plan will not work, will you go to plan C? So when you ask them to design those plans, then they own those plans. And once they own
Right.
those plans, then ultimately the thought of becoming a founder almost is getting inbuilt in them.
That's awesome. So you don't necessarily hire people who have a founder mindset, but you kind of guide them in or train them into having that founder mindset. That's really powerful.
That's correct because you can't always get lucky with having people who've got founder mindset because some of them they don't know what is the founder's mindset because they've never done it before,
Right.
right? They don't know what it takes to become a founder. They possibly
Hmm.
have a very vague concept, but once they get into your shoes, you have to let them wear that shoe. You have
Right.
to let them run that shoe, but you also run along with them so that when they're falling down, you're there to help them and catch them and get them up again.
You sound like someone who has so much insight, almost like a mentor or like a thought leader. I'm wondering, is all of that wisdom coming from your long experience, or have you yourself had a mentor that kind of guided you through this in the past?
I think that wisdom basically did not come from only the professional experience, right? Professional experience will teach you a lot of up and down. I think in my previous organization, I learned a lot of this. But I think when you add spirituality along with your professional career, that helps a lot, Tim. I think I believe any great founder or any great personality needs to have a combination of what we call as IQ, PQ, EQ, and SQ. A lot of time people have IQ and they have PQ, basically intelligent quotient and physical quotient. Right? A lot of people have that because that's what we start as a child, right? We are physically active.
Hmm.
We learn different subjects. Slowly and slowly, I think you have to inbuild that EQ, which is emotional quotient, and that happens a lot of from experience plus a bit of a spirituality. But I think the key difference
Hmm.
that SQ can make is that you start understanding the purpose of life, right? You start understanding the purpose
Hmm.
of business, and you start understanding what others are going through. And when they're down, only SQ to a large extent, along with EQ, can help them to lift up. And for that, I think when I
SQ
was
being
going,
spiritual, I assume, right?
yes, yeah, spiritual really doesn't mean that you become a monk, by the way, okay? But how you
Yeah.
become a professional SQ individual is what I'm talking about here.
Mm.
Uh, and I think that to me happened when I was going through my own tough phase, when I was going through a earnout, and there was so much of pressure on the earnout because the pressure is coming from everywhere. Everybody's in it together to achieve the EBITDAs. And when COVID happened, I realized that adding that element where my mentors, apart from the professional mentors, have been a very spiritual mentor. So there are a couple of mentors that I have, which again come from the spiritual part of the world, who I interact or meet very regularly. We also have a group of entrepreneurs. It's also called Startup Yoga. That's another part of the group that I am, which is again
Cool.
entrepreneurs. It's an entrepreneur community called Startup Yoga. But yeah, that's one of the community that I'm part of. But before that, I got a couple of mentors who helped me to stay calm in difficult situations, because chaos will be always around you. Uh, but how do you stay calm in that chaos is not something that you can learn in a textbook, right?
Hmm.
When you have to convince everybody to sacrifice for a greater good, uh, and you also have to sacrifice. You've got your own family, right?
Hmm.
Your wife possibly will not be happy with all of those things that you possibly might do. You have to give your tuition fees to your kids. Everybody is in the similar boat, right? But I think having a spiritual guru, I believe, adds so much of wisdom in your own life because ultimately it tells you the purpose of life. Why you exist, why your business exists is a question that everybody has to ask. And once
Hmm.
you start looking at those things and start implementing those things in your life, slowly, slowly you start implementing that in a professional career, which basically helps you to
Hmm.
be very, very calm and composed even in difficult situations.
I'm definitely getting a lot of calm vibes from you, so I really appreciate it. It's like calming me down to talk to you. Usually I'm very hyper, but now I feel like very kind of at peace. I like that a lot. So yeah, thank you so much for all these insights.
Once you define what is the purpose, so when I have my team with me who reporting to me, I say, why are you joining us? What is the purpose that you have to join a company which is not as big as others? Because if the purpose of life is that I want to make quick bucks right now, and I'm very aggressive, I'm a go-getter, that's fine. But if the purpose is so limited that I want to be wealthier, I want to be richer, I want to have fame, I think that all too is a secondary thing, right? When your purpose of life is so big that I want to make a change, I want my company to make a change. I want that things that I'm doing, it should make a change to my consumers or my customers. They should get better
Hmm.
insights, right? Our purpose of business is, can I get better insights using Neurosensum? Can I do more research using SurveySensum? Can I make more impact with the data that I'm collecting? If that's what we are doing for our customers, our purpose of life is solved. And when you're
Hmm.
solving that purpose of why your business exists, ultimately you solve the wealth and the fame and everything which comes along with it, right? Because you're traveling a journey, it's the same for a purpose of life. What is the purpose that we exist? Are we only existing
Hmm.
to make money for ourselves? Everybody wants more money and more fame. But is a purpose collective that I want my team together with me to grow richer, to become famous, or am I the only one? I mean, if you go to our LinkedIn page, you will see my co-founders and my team members are almost as famous as I am on LinkedIn. They're possibly doing more
Hmm.
events than I do. They're doing far more many podcasts than I do. So are you only doing it together only for yourself, or you're getting your collective team together and everybody's rising up? If that's what the purpose
Right.
of life is, it solves many, many things.
I love it. Well, on that high note, I think we've learned a lot, and I'm going to absorb this episode because there's a lot of heavy stuff, a lot of things that I don't think about a lot, but I really appreciate all this feedback. And sort of to conclude, whether or not it's part of this spiritual discussion or not, is there someone or something you'd like to shout out to as a conclusion to our podcast?
I think the first thing I'll shout out is to my wife. Uh, I think in the last 13, 14 years from the time I started my entrepreneurship journey, she has seen a lot of up and down, right? She has gone through a lot when I've gone through a lot. And she has always stood by me. She has always been there encouraging me, pushing me through. I think the big shout out goes to her because without her support, uh, I would not have been where I am today. I'll say second big shout out will be to my mentors, which I call as spiritual mentors. There are a couple of them who are very, very close to my heart. I would have been a lost entrepreneur uh, if I didn't have their support at different point of time. When I'm in a fix, I go to them not for a professional answer, but for a personal answer. If personally solved, professionally will get solved. And third big shout out
Hmm.
is to my team, the team who's working with me. They're working hand in hand. Today, I think we are as an organization where we are is because they are with me and I love them a lot. Yeah.
I love it, Rajiv. Very nice words, and thank you so much for being on this episode. And I look forward to staying in touch with you to discuss all this cool stuff I just learned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks a lot.